All right, anytime.
I'd like to welcome everybody to the Public Works Committee meeting of March 13th, 2019. Roll call, please.
Here.
Here.
Here. Here. Move on to approval or amendment of the agenda. Anybody have any changes? Any objection to approval by acclamation?
Sounds good.
Approved by acclamation. I don't see that we have any announcements, appointments. Move on to citizen comment. Anybody from the audience like to come up and state their piece? Seeing none, we'll move on to reports of aldermen and committee chairs. I have no report. Alderman Leahy.
I'd like to bring to the Parks Department's attention, we have a downed 2 tree trunks at 2933 Hillsdale. This is a city property in which we have a tree that has 3 trunks to it, and 2 of the 3 have been down for 3 to 5 weeks and probably need to get trimmed up and pulled out of there. That's it.
Alderman Dimmitt.
No report.
Alderman Wiggy.
No report.
Madam City Administrator, any report? Departments reports. Any department heads have a report? See them beating a path to the microphone, so we'll move on to the consent agenda. All we have is the minutes from the February 13th meeting. Anybody have a
Approve
problem?
as submitted.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Down to new business. It looks like we have bids on carnival rides. I believe this is Eric. Rush. The carnival rides for our next Brentwood days.
Good afternoon. So we are looking to seeking approval to choose vendors to provide carnival rides at Brentwood Days. We just finished up our 3-year contract with 2 renewals, so we're at the end of our 5 years. So we had to go out for a new RFP. The RFP was issued on January 27th. They were due back on February 19th. They're open, so it was open for 3.5 weeks, right around 3.5 weeks. The RFP was very similar to our last RFP, 6 major rides, 4 kids rides, not operate skills of chance. They cannot sell beer, wine, or alcohol, cannot offer cash prizes. Obviously, safety is our number 1 concern. Rides should be clean and well-maintained, and the ride operators shall provide clean staff shirts, those type of things. So those type of things like that. Knowing last time we didn't have a well return on our RFP, I reached out to other municipalities and so got who they used. And so we reached out to some other companies, the carnival people, companies who did carnival rides for Baldwin Days down in Volley Park, the City of O'Fallon, Webster Groves, and Manchester. Unfortunately, either they didn't respond or they mentioned the fact that their season's already set. So they basically said thank you, but no thank you. And as I mentioned in the memo, basically we had a response from one company, which is American Banner Amusements. They're the company who's provided the carnival rides at Brentwood Days for the past 13 years. So again, we're comfortable recommending American Banner Amusement for the general reasons is that they've done it. We've been very satisfied with the work they've done. They've continued to provide good service for us. They've done, in addition to working with us, they've done Eureka Days, Madison County Fair, Warson Woods. So they've done a good job. So with the response RFP, they propose a price of $32,500 for this year with a 5% increase for each subsequent year. In our budget, we listed a price of $35,000, so it actually would be under budget for this year, and then we would know each subsequent year what to budget for. So our recommendation is to award the 3-year contract with an option for 2 one-year extensions to American Banner Amusement. in the price of $32,500 for this year with a 5% increase with each subsequent year.
Questions for Eric? David?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hey, Eric, how does this contract compare to the ones in the past with the same company, price-wise?
Very similar. Last year it was a 3% increase from last year. It was 31,000 and some change. So yeah,
And there's an insurance requirement on this?
yeah, they have to
Indemnify the
provide
city?
insurance to the.
$1 million or?
It's actually, I think it's 3 million because we asked for a little bit more because it is carnival rides.
Thank you.
Eric, we kind of talked about trying to revamp attendance down there at Brentwood Days. Not so much this year because it's a centennial year, but going forward. If we were to charge or have them charge for rides, would we still be able to do that within, to kind of counter some of the cost of this? Would that be an option, or would that be something that have to be put into the contract?
I think I'd have a conversation with them. They're a really good company to work with, and I think if we went to the position of saying, hey, within our contract, what we might want to do is go from free to then charging. Could we renegotiate our contract? I think they'd be okay with that. And our contract still, even though it's a 3-year contract, still has a 60-day out, as well as a clause that has to have a Board of Aldermen appropriation every year. So if we decided, if one, for some reason, decided not to have Brentwood Days, I'm not saying we would, but again, there's that clause in there as well. So either way, I think we'd be able to renegotiate this.
What happens with a rainout?
But right now, it depends on when we cancel. Unfortunately, a lot of times, since they come on Tuesday, they're already set up, so we're kind of on the hook for that. So
Yeah. I'm not opposed to the ride company. Like you said, we've used them for the last 13 years. I'm a little hesitant, the fact that we're putting out there that we're holding a community event, but you can't seem to get bidders. And yet I know there are other ride companies out there. And I'm questioning, why aren't these people bidding? Now, you said you reached out to a few of them, and they said even with an 8-month notice, it's too late for them to put it on their calendars. I'm just having trouble with all of that, to tell you the truth. You're getting 6 to 8 rides arrangements, so you're looking at about $4,000 for each activity that they're putting up for us. They also get to include their game booths and stuff into the facility, and they get 100% of those profits. The cost for $32,000 for a total of 12 hours of running for the picnic, that's $3,000 an hour that they're getting, type thing. I think there's got to be a way to keep this competitive, or our costs just get out of hand to work with. That was my thinking when I was reading all the paperwork. Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, I'd entertain a motion to forward onto the board.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Nothing else to choose.
All right.
I was a yes. I was a yes. The process works. You went through a bidding and everything, but the fact that we can't seem to get people to respond to it, something's not right there.
I think in the future, we know at the end of,
September that we're going to do it again.
but I think this year we were delayed because there was a conversation of whether or not we would have free, and I think that's why it took us so long to start the bidding process. So
But you're still 8 months ahead of the activity.
most people have their contract out or their calendar set before now. So
Okay.
my recommendation was I'll bid it out in September, October, so that we hopefully will have a better turnaround, a better process.
If it's possible.
Yeah,
Thank you.
happy to do so.
Eric, stick around because next on the agenda is landmark tree ordinance. I guess a discussion on amending Chapter 230 of the municipal code.
Yeah, so as we talked about probably last year, and we started talking about the tree ordinance or tree policies and procedures. One of the things I talked about is different things we might want to bring back to the Public Works Committee for consideration. And one of the things we talked about was tree preservation throughout the entire urban forest. And there's lots of things to consider, including things like construction, tree preservation during construction, lots of other things. And one of the things we thought we'd throw out there to begin with is the idea of landmark trees. And this really kind of gets to the conversation of, does the city want to have any sort of ordinances of preserving trees, especially on private property? And so knowing that this would be maybe a hot topic, this is probably the easiest sort of ordinance to kind of discuss first before we go into maybe some more difficult conversations. So again, knowing that this is kind of, we're talking about private trees. And so this is what we decided to bring forward. So obviously the idea is that, we do consider the urban forest an important element of the character of the ambience of the city. And preserving the urban forest does have a lot of benefits, including public health, welfare in the city's physical and aesthetic environment. And one of the ways a lot of municipalities across the country preserve the urban forest is by having landmark tree ordinances. And so basically some of these ways they can preserve that is through ordinances like these that forbid property owners to remove any landmark trees without the authorization of the city. And so the way we would do that is to amend Chapter 230 of the Brentwood Code of Ordinances and adding 3 new sections relating to tree preservation. With this new section, a landmark tree would be defined as any tree exceeding 20 inches of DBH, and that's diameter at breast height, just a way of measurement, in fair or better condition. That is not an invasive species as defined by the Missouri Department of Conservation. In addition, a lesser sized tree can be considered a landmark tree if it's rare or unusual species, an exceptional quality, or has an association with a historical event or person. And so that's kind of one of the ways we would define it. And again, some municipalities around St. Louis that have these type of ordinances include Clayton, Creve Coeur, Ladue, Lake St. Louis, Webster Groves. And so that's kind of the background. We have the ordinance ready if it were to pass, which includes the amendment to Chapter 230. So that's what we're bringing forward for today for discussion.
Eric, could you walk us through the scenario? I got a 22-inch oak in my backyard. I start heading there with a chainsaw. I mean, who's going to go out there and tell me not to cut this down? How does that process work?
The idea, again, it is partly, it would be done through plan development, obviously, it'd be through code enforcement once we determine that it would be a landmark tree. So the first part is the designation process. And so through it is basically the way a tree would have to be nominated. It could be nominated by, staff, which would be either director or city staff, which would primarily be the arborist on the staff, property owner, or even elected official would be the idea to say, hey, we think this is a landmark tree. The staff would go out and make sure that it would fit the designee of a landmark tree. Once that would happen, then the owner would be notified by certified mail to say, hey, you have a landmark tree in your property. At this point, then they know that they wouldn't be able to remove the tree without the authorization of the city. At that point, you're basically relying on the homeowner to do the right thing and not take a chainsaw to that tree. And then you're working on the homeowner to work with the city to go through a process of saying, hey, at this point, it's not in good or fair condition anymore. There's some danger to the home. And then again, the arborist would come out and check that. And then there would be a process of paperwork to fill out to then make sure that it's okay.
What are the fines connected with me taking down my 22-inch?
Well, I did not include that in any of this because, again, I just wanted to see if it'd be floated out there to begin with to see if it's something the city would do. I think that's a good point. I think you probably should associate some sort of fines, or then if there's no teeth behind it, then what would be the purpose of it? So, although I did not include, this was written with the assistance of City Attorney O'Keefe, we probably should put together some sort of fine before it would go to the Board of Aldermen.
Andy?
Let me take you down a different path. You have a tree that somewhere along the line someone wants it to be established as a legendary tree. If this process is acceptable, somewhere along the life of this tree, there's a limb that needs to be taken down. It threatens the neighbor's fence, it threatens the house, whatever. Who's responsible for taking out the limb?
It'd still be the responsibility of the homeowner as it is their tree.
But he has to get our permission to do what he thinks is best on his property for his tree to work with. I'm not excited about it. If we go around the city of Brentwood, I think we've been taking down trees, specifically the ashes, because we're trying to eliminate some of the pre-problems of infections and stuff. But some of the trees we've taken down have been more than 20 inches. And they were the curb trees because it added the shade for the roadways and stuff. I think that the homeowner has the responsibility and should have the ability to decide what to do with his property as he sees fit. I don't think he should get to have to deal with the city on a sentimental or other issue. I think if he's going to carry the bill, then he has the right to make the decisions. If we're not paying the bill, I don't think we should stand in their way to work with it. So I'm not excited about this bill.
Yeah, I mean, I applaud the effort to protect our trees. I think the heart's in the right place. It seems like a complex process, right? You're gonna have to go around, identify landscape trees, notify people. You know, what happens 25 years from now after that house has been sold and somebody doesn't realize they have a landmark tree? You know, it doesn't seem like there's a problem that we're trying to solve with this, and it just seems kind of onerous and sticky. So as much as I want to protect trees as much as possible, I'm not in favor of this either.
I'll weigh in. Yeah, I agree with Brandon. I appreciate this, and I certainly understand the benefit of doing this. But I think the costs, potential costs, outweigh the benefit, and I see that being with the amount of infill housing that we have in Brentwood, it could prevent somebody from putting an addition on their house, or make it very cumbersome to put an addition on their house. A new piece of property in there altogether if there's a landmark tree smack dab in the middle of their backyard. For that and for other reasons, I can't support going forward on this.
So then can I assume the next part of things that we're talking about was any sort of tree then during construction or removal, any sort of tree is sort of a tree protection ordinance of how to preserve a tree during construction. Then if you're going to remove trees, a sort of replacement per caliper inch, and then a fine associated with that would also fine it to be unfavorable here. And I'll just move along my merry way. I'm happy to do so. Again, I understood that this, and we talked about this about a year ago, and you guys basically said, hey, let's bring something forward to see what the feelings would be. And I understand completely, but
I think it's a good idea to get a heading check on, where we want to go. I think protection of a tree during, construction is a good thing because you've got people backing trucks into things and, just basic steps of what should be done to protect the tree. I know you'd mentioned putting barriers around it or whatever just to protect it. I would be in favor of something like that to protect the trees. I don't know about the, forced replacement of, you have to go find somewhere to plant 5 trees to get rid of ones. But I think something along protection of trees during construction, I would be in favor of.
Well, Eric, well, maybe this is a question for Lisa. I mean, would that be under section 400 of our building code as far as during construction, how? Okay.
Lisa, if I may, when we come in for a builder's permit, is there anything that the city gives the potential participant, permit person, I need to do X, Y, Z, that helps them guide them through that permit process, that we could put in a paragraph that the value of trees on properties do improve the value of the land and the appearance? I'm leaving it up to the homeowner for their best discretion, but we can always be a little encouraging that keeping trees and shrubs in the area isn't a bad thing either, type thing in our permit process.
We have
I think something in that direction might be helpful and accomplish what Eric would like to see us move towards without having to get bogged down with ordinances. Suggestion, just a suggestion.
All right. Well, do I just call this dead on arrival, or do we need to formally go through a tongue lashing with the vote? All right,
There you
well, yeah, I mean, I'll entertain a motion, and if I hear silence. Well, Eric, thanks for looking into this for us. I
Happy to
appreciate
do
it.
so. Thanks.
All right.
Street banners.
Okay, now we have street light banners. I think this is Dan. This is a discussion on adding street light banners to the existing city-owned street lights in certain areas.
Right, I was asked to take a look at this from the standpoint of possibly putting in banners on the city-owned streetlights, since we can't hang anything from the Ameren lights. We don't have their permission to do that. So I looked at it citywide. We have roughly 88 streetlights, and I included a little map with like a little red squiggle indicating where they were. So you've got some along Strassner, both at the berm, and then as you go further east, along Litzinger between Annalee and McKnight, Rose Avenue. Those are primarily it, and then Hanley Industrial. So adding all those up, there's roughly 88. There's a few of them on Rose that I would suggest you don't do anything to because they've already got signage on them. You know, there's one that indicates the weight limit of the bridge and stuff like that. So those would be off limits. So of that, I thought, you know, what if you were to do roughly a fourth, 20 of these banners? So I put together a little sketch. I took one of our existing product sheets for the light, took a banner graphic, and then dropped it on there. So that's roughly what it would look like conceptually, just a banner that's cantilevered off the side of the pole. It would say Brentwood 100 years, on both sides. And there's some hardware that's necessary. I indicated or put a graphic up of what one of those looks like already attached. Not necessarily here, obviously, since it's for a Taylor Swift concert, but it was just a good graphic showing the compression fittings. It won't cause any damage to the pole because they're compression fittings like gaskets that wrap around it. And I did get a second quote late yesterday, so I updated the memo. So under finance, if you were to do 20 of them, the all-in cost for materials, hardware, and installation, basically a turnkey operation, would be between $4,300 and roughly $4,600. And that would come through, the community relations, centennial commemorative, anything to kind of promote events that falls under that line item. I don't know if it's the desire of the Public Works Committee to push this forward. Again, we've got two quotes. We're following the purchase procedures. If you wanted us to move forward with it, we could take it to the full board and, route the capital.
Eric, if I can get your opinion, we did street light banners in the Brentwood Rec Center parking lot for 2 or 3 years for the figure skating group. Do we have any feedback on how successful or how valuable they were? Okay.
But I do know that the banners, when people walk into our building, people notice and do like those. Staff said prior to the brackets breaking off that people noticed them from Brentwood Boulevard.
To work with, okay. I'm looking at the Litzinger Avenue, and yeah, that and your Strassner may get some traffic flow to help some visibility, but I just don't know how you measure the success of the investment and the effort type thing.
Yeah, and the hardware you could use for other banners, as long as they fit that hardware. So they're roughly 18 inches wide by 3 feet tall.
Oh.
So if you wanted it, music on the menu or future events or Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, whatever you wanted the messaging to be, it would be right around in that same band as far as cost, but you wouldn't have the added investment of the hardware.
Work with.
These would just be at predominant intersections.
Right, yeah, 20 was just an arbitrary number based on like a fourth of it, because you wouldn't necessarily have to hit every single light, because that's why I indicated like how many lights were within a single stretch. I think it would lose some of the messaging if you put on every single light along, say, Litzinger. There's roughly 30 lights there, maybe you put it at just the intersections.
Is this something that we could have, Public Works install instead of, paying a company to come in and do it? I mean, would that be a?
We could, I wanted
more
to see what it would be
cost-effective?
all in, just as a turnkey. It's like basically just hand it off to them in case, we're doing sidewalks or curbs or whatever other task, because obviously I have to break off 2 or 3 people to do this task, which we decorate the Litzinger lights already. We put garland and bows on there so we can use a step ladder and pickup truck and send a couple guys out there, and usually it's a day, to knock out those 30, maybe day and a half. So if we were doing 20 of these, I would expect roughly the same thing. It was just a way of comparing, do I want to spend, $1,000 or so with this company, or the labor is my labor.
Right.
It just means something else needs to be jostled around as far as priority.
Thank you. Dan, if I'm reading the budget correctly on this line item, we've set aside approximately $48,000 for community relations, and this is about just under 10% of that. But this wasn't identified in that. Is that right, or was this included in that description?
To my knowledge, it was not, but that line item is a catch-all for commemorative type events.
It's not, only I'm asking is it's not going to affect our ability to spend the rest of that money on any of those items that were identified.
Janet could address that because if you
put
could come up
together that
here, because
line.
she worked on that budget and in preparation for the centennial, I think both her and Eric reflect that increase in their budgets. So, Janet.
Yes, in that budget, I allocated about approximately $11,000 for centennial items.
Okay, so this would be part of that.
Be part of that.
Great, thank you.
And I would be open to less than 20 banners as well.
Thank you.
Dan, do you know when the second quote is coming?
I actually updated the memo and uploaded it, so it should be in your board docs. If
You'd
you
have to
click on it.
refresh.
Yeah. It was just this morning. They sent it late yesterday.
Yep. You're between 43 and 4,600.
Correct.
Yep.
Yeah, the second one that came in was slightly higher than the first one. So the first,
To make sure we had an opposing quote,
we do.
Yep.
Yeah, it's apples and apples. So they quoted us for the materials, the hardware, and the installation. And to Alderman Wegge's point, if you wanted to save on the installation, you could deduct $1,000. So it'd be $3,300 for 20 of them. It would just be, I would tell our guys to, get a ladder, get the, whatever you need. I'm assuming socket set or something to attach those compression clamps.
I would make a motion to proceed with the lower bid, the 4,300. I would be in favor of having, our employees do the installation. It just seems like a lot to put some hose clamps onto a pole.
Second the motion.
all right, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, thanks, Dan.
Okay.
Where are we at?
You're gonna
I think
skip-
you're up again. We're talking
Yes.
about a couple of Project Clear projects. For those listening at home, this Project Clear is a separation of sanitary and sewer lines. And I guess we've got the first ones in Ward 1. Give us some info, Dan?
Correct. There's actually 3 projects. We've listed 2 here at the future meeting, the April meeting. MSD can give a more concrete update on Rosalie, which isn't included in the agenda. But item D is Tillis Park, Litzinger, Park Ridge. It's a inflow and infiltration reduction. So basically, they're looking for any connections that they don't want on their system. So it'd be downspout, sump pumps, things of that nature. Basically trying to do what Project Clear was set out to do, which is separate sanitary and storm, since they have to be separated per EPA. This one's right at around 60% design. They hope to have the 100% design drawings done this year and then start construction at the beginning of 2020. The area of impact in Brentwood specifically would be Sonora Avenue, basically from Kempton going east around 500 feet. What that means is they would put in a 12-inch diameter storm sewer pipe along that southern edge of Sonora, which means an open excavation. They'll damage the pavement. They're aware of our requirement since Sonora was just sealed last year. We had that max product applied to it. So, you know, I looked it up, it was a little over $12,000 worth of sealant. So I was like, at the very least, you're gonna have to do full depth replacement on areas that you disturb. They were gonna go from the center line all the way to the edge, so replace half the road, and then apply sealant from edge to edge over that disturbed length. So it'll be restored, it'll be black again and look like new pavement even after they do their open excavation. And then there are some addresses, they gave us a list, which I included in there, of areas that need to be disconnected, you know, either along Sonora, McKnight, areas in Brentwood, areas in Ladue. That's pretty much it for that project, and they can provide us additional details, like I said, at the next meeting. And then the next item is the Mark Twain inflow and infiltration reduction project. That particular one, it has no plans yet. Burns and McDonnell is under contract with MSD to develop plans. The first thing they'll be doing is sending out their subcontractor, which is Pangea Surveying, and they'll do the field data collection with their survey tools. So what that means is they'll have to enter some properties, measure elevations, things of that nature, which that letter's included. And what that means in that particular one, if they replace the line, which I believe they will, along Joseph, that street was paved in 2017. And that was an actual mill and overlay. I looked that up and I believe it was $26,000. I know we replaced, or, you know, we did a mill and overlay on that particular street. Yeah, Joseph mill and overlay completed summer 2017, $26,356.10. So again, that one, if you do, you know, any disruption, it's gonna have to be replaced 100% just because, you know, its useful life should be around 10 years and you're cutting short that useful life. So MSD is aware of that and, you know, they'll put that in their contract documents. And then Rosalie's one, I don't have any drawings on or anything, but we'll have for the next meeting to give you an update on that. And MSD said they'd be more than willing to attend any ward meetings or any board meetings, committee meetings, whatever you want from them. And they might have news after the election because they have Proposition S on the ballot, which is stormwater related.
Questions for Dan? David?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dan, I brought this up to the Ward 1 meeting last night because we had some people there from York, and that was one of the, York Hills Drive is another section
Yes.
where they're going to put in a storm sewer. But I also brought up the fact that there are a number of homes that are going to be disconnected from the, I guess it's the sanitary sewer, because they're downspouts or sump pumps or whatever drain directly into that. Now, when they disconnected, is that on MSD's dime or is that the homeowner's dime?
It's all MSD's cost.
Okay.
Yeah, they just need, I believe they have like some sort of release that the property owner signs off on saying that they can enter the property, do their work, and then leave. But it's at no cost to the property owner.
Okay, and there was somebody from, one of the York trustees was at the meeting last night, and he said they've already talked to MSD and they're good to go with the York Hills Drive road.
Okay. Yeah, you're right, that's another one that they'll disturb, they'll open cut it. And that one's at an angle too, so it's very important that they notify us when they're doing construction, just because of emergency response for our sanitation collections and things of that nature. It'll be a little bit of a headache for a short period of time until they backfill the pipe and open the road up again.
When they remove from sanitary, will they, each home, the stormwater discharge, will that then be tied into a parallel stormwater line?
Not necessarily, because they sent me some drawings. It's kind of like those storm tech chambers. They would create like almost like a cistern, you know, an underground chamber that they would take your downspout and channel it into that if there's no nearby pipes or anything of that nature.
And who gets to maintain that?
That I don't know. We can
homeowner
ask
picks it
MSD. I
up.
would assume it would be the homeowner, but I'd be speculating.
And Dan, I did look at one of the drawings on one of the homes, I think it's Sonora, because there is a concern that I have. If I'm reading the plans correctly, and maybe I'm not, but when they disconnect, they're going to rerun it, and they run it over to the driveway,
Right.
and then just for it to discharge onto the driveway, then into the street. But I thought that wouldn't that be a problem with our code because you can't have water going into a
Right.
street or a sidewalk?
It'd be a nuisance.
So I don't know if we need to talk to MSD about that. Make sure, go over the plans for each of those homes that they're looking at disconnecting, make sure they don't end up violating our code.
Would
Yeah, in
they,
that particular one, they asked for comments, so we can add that to the
Okay.
comment list.
would they be interested, or can we have them come in next Public Works meeting?
Yes,
in
yeah,
April?
they offered that because they were originally supposed to be here tonight, and they said, well, there was a conflict between, they want to be here with the consultant. They don't want just the consultant representing MSD, so they can certainly address all that.
If we can get that to happen. Questions on this subject? All right, stick around, Dan, because I think we're going to talk about that street sweeper schedule.
Back in the summer, we were asked to take a look at creating some sort of logical flow of how we do street sweeping. Most of the time, it's just kind of done, we do the major streets, you know, where most of the vehicles travel, either Strassen or Eulalie, things of that nature, and then we hit the smaller streets after that. And this, originally I developed it per ward, but after talking to the operators, the folks that actually run the equipment, that probably wouldn't lend itself to a good concept. So what we redid, based on their input, was an actual list based on days of the week, you know, and also what they could accomplish during that day. So assuming that the sweeper's operational, that you've got one of your 3 operators, like on Mondays, you should be able to do that grouping of streets. Because if the street sweepers run during an 8-hour day, you should be able to hit all those areas, empty it. You know, it may not work out on a Monday in the fall when you've got a lot of leaves, but like right now, as we're getting into spring, you should be able to go through all of those. And even as you go into April, May, you should be able to do these. It's only in the heavier months. So what we did with their input was develop like each day, you know, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then also looking at it with respect to where sanitation is collecting. You know, we don't want to run the sweeper down a street where there's a bunch of cans along the edge of the road because we're weaving in and out. So what this would do is allow folks who, if you lived on, you know, say Annalee south of Litzinger, if you knew the sweeper is going to come out on a Thursday, don't park in the street, park in your driveway. And if we don't hit it that Thursday, then it should be the following Thursday. But sometime on a Thursday, your street should be hit if you're in that particular group. And then so on and so forth. You know, Fridays, it would be like Hatton, Kempton, Parkside. You know, just to give people information. If you want us to do a better job and get closer to the edge, don't park during those days. I know City of St. Louis has an elaborate map, but they actually have a whole street sweeping department. You know, we've only got 1 sweeper and 3 people with the CDL and air brake endorsement.
No, I just got an email today from somebody on Madge wanting the sweet gum balls removed off the street. But it's, at the same time, it's where everybody parks their cars.
Right.
So now I can at least point to, all right, go.
Yeah, because if you're fine with this, we can give it to the communications manager and we can just kind of broadcast that out there and see if people actually follow, you know, this list.
Nowhere in your memo, Dan, do you point, are we starting this, say, April through October, or are you talking a shorter summer season or whatever?
We try to sweep, like the sweeper was out today.
Yeah,
So,
doing
you know,
year-round
because we had
doesn't
heavy
seem-
storms, so of course there's sweet gumballs and leaves and mud and debris pushed out into the street. So if you want, I mean, we could put a time period because, you know, typically you're right, you wouldn't sweep necessarily in December, January unless there's an
Well,
event.
the other half is when we do the leaf vacuuming, I know we tell the people to please leave them on the right of way, not in the curb to work with, but not everybody gets the memo type thing. I assume your drivers know we swing around those because we don't really want to tear up the machine by trying to pull up the leaves through that method.
Right, and we actually don't vacuum them up. They can contract with Hanson's or one
To
of
do
those
it.
tree services.
But, so,
Because I did put in the table, I had put
Yep.
about nuisance
Activities.
prohibitions, because it's like, you're not to just take your leaf blower and blow all your grass
Mm-hmm.
clippings and stuff in the street, because you know the next day the sweeper is gonna pick up the street. That's not how it's supposed to work. You know, you should either, you know, use a bagger type mower or something, you know, sweep up your clippings and leaves.
a nice article to go in the newsletter. help educate, but I like what you're suggesting.
Yeah, I think when we put this out there, when we publicize it, I think we should set expectations that this is not an absolute hard and fast, that, all efforts will be made. Just to
Discretionary.
make sure that people understand this is kind of a rough outline and maybe some advice like, if a bunch of neighbors got together and said, we're not gonna park any cars on the street because, they're coming in on Monday, maybe suggest a call to Public Works to make sure that, people come in. Because every 3 months or so, I get this from a resident, like, I wish we knew which day they were coming so we could, really clean out. And then, my street's not on here, is there, I assume that's like,
Oh, it was missed?
yeah. I know Douglas
I know
is
he's
the
been on
highest
there.
elevation cul-de-sac, you think all the gumballs run downhill.
Hill from there, yes.
And we do throw
Yeah.
most of it on Bridgeport anyway, but,
Yeah,
With
we'll go back through
slingshots.
the list and make sure all the streets are on there, because I know we didn't put Brentwood Forest, but we put the disclaimer on there that the street sweeping is done by special request along High School, Swan Circle, Eager, Renwood. Typically, Brentwood Forest, their contractor does a really good job of blowing all the clippings and stuff, and they clean it all up. They do quite a bit of landscaping, whether it's mowing the grass or trimming or whatever they're doing. And then I guess we could put somewhere, not necessarily on here, but out in the newsletter, that you can always go on MyGov, and there is a drop down where you can ask for street
Right.
sweeping,
right.
and put a specific address if, I'm just thinking it's like, I know you're not supposed to light fireworks, but I'm thinking of my own subdivision where there's piles of fireworks after 4th of July and people don't pick them up. So,
My pile ends up in my neighbor's yard.
but yeah, we can certainly do that and, make sure that we don't miss a Douglas Court or any other one.
Well, I think you've got our full support up here, Dan, as far as putting it
Again, I
on
don't
the
believe we
publish.
need a motion or anything. We'll
No.
just
All right.
update this and run with it.
Keep going.
Thank you and everybody that worked hard to put it together.
Okay, thanks.
All right, moving on. I think it's our last item, and this is an amendment of Chapter 500 regarding updating our codes from our building codes from 2009 to 2018. I guess Lisa's here to
Yes.
fill us in.
So time flies by pretty quick. I think it was just about 1 year ago when we appeared before Public Works, and we discussed with the committee about adopting new ICC codes, going to the 2015 edition. We're currently on the 2009 edition, and that was adopted in July of 2014. So again, it appeared about a year ago this time that seemed what we would recommend. But then, as soon as we were working on that, the more we read, the more we talked to our peers and so forth at conferences, it started to become maybe obvious that we really need to start looking at the 2018 suite of codes instead. So we did kind of follow up with that even more so. We started going to just kind of some meetings that were kind of throwing out, highlighting differences between the 2015 and the 2018 codes. That's usually how they do it. They don't go back and compare 2009 to 2018, but usually the last 3 cycle of codes. So again, with that information, and then based, as I said, talking to peers, and it seemed to be then that some of the cities and counties around our area then were starting to adopt 2018. We, by the time we got really done with that preliminary research and so forth, we felt like that's what we wanted to recommend to this board, is that we go ahead and just adopt the 2018 suite of codes. So again, when we say suite of codes, we're talking about all the codes that are established by ICC with all their conventions, meetings, delegates to get to that point. The suite of codes include a new building code, residential code, property maintenance. There's about 6 or 7 of those codes. The electric code is a little bit different. That's published by a different entity. But other than that, again, we're here tonight to just kind of present our recommendation to move forward with the 2018 codes. We, of course, have been talking to people as they've been coming in and getting building permits and so forth, both in the commercial and residential realms. And in fact, I would say that it's been overly positive. In fact, they were like, is the city going to be adopting new codes soon? The whole thought is that every time you graduate to a new cycle of codes, it's better and improved than the last cycle. So we were not picking up really anything of substance that seemed to be controversial in either both the commercial or residential codes. Everything, like I said, has been pretty positive. And in fact, we are already starting to see projects that are in the queue, but maybe still a few months away from actually submitting their construction plans, already designing their projects with the 2018 codes in mind. We've been telling them that the timeframe that we're on to look into this was that when we consulted with our city attorney, the first step with adoption of new building codes is to, whatever you propose to adopt needs to be on file with the city clerk's office 90 days before you kind of start the clock. So that was done actually in January of this year, the 2018 codes. And so again, I think we're ready to move forward with that. The advantages, again, would be, obviously it helps with both our ISO and our CRS ratings. Our ISO rating is the one where the insurance industry establishes what basically residents and businesses will pay in insurance premiums and rates. And then the community rating service, or community rating system, is related a little bit more to the floodplain ordinance. And we became a CRS community back in 2015, which basically states Brentwood's intention to go above and beyond just regular floodplain measures. So again, when you start working with the most latest codes, those really help with your ratings and your criteria when they come in and assess your situation. So that's what we're going to recommend. We're not asking for any action tonight, other than if you feel like that recommendation from us is solid, that just looking a little bit for direction, that we would come back, hopefully at the April meeting, with a draft ordinance for you to consider. So how this usually happens is you look at passing an ordinance that adopts the codes, but communities can also put some exceptions to the requirements in those codes. And that's what we're working on right now. From, again, our peers and those that have already adopted the 2018 codes, we're looking to see if there certainly would be any exceptions that maybe we should consider from the codes. But other than that, I did want to say also, I brought the experts here tonight. So I do have Steve Muskoff and David Cootie, our building inspector team, and they'll probably take the hard-hitting questions when it comes to code requirements. But otherwise, hopefully this information was very generalized to get us started, so.
First question I have is regarding alterations, and they talk about going from level 3 to level 2 if we adopt these codes. Can you kind of explain that change, what that means?
So, which one would you like to start? I feel like they could better address it. They go to the training, so you're in good hands.
The levels of alteration are, level 1 is basically cosmetic, like just removing a finish, replacing it with a finish, no alterations, nothing structural, things like that. 2 goes a step farther. If you're removing wall finish, moving walls, things like that on the inside of a home, it would have to be brought up to code in the area of the alteration back to its source. So you would, for an example, in electrical, you would probably have to run new home run circuits back to the panel instead of just tying on in a wall where there's an existing wire. Excuse me. Level 3 alterations are anything that entails more than 50% of the building area of the home. It has to be brought up to code if it's exposed.
So if you're talking someone taking their home and adding a bedroom or kicking out a kitchen, you're going now to a level 2 from a level 3 for something like that, under
Yes.
the 2018 codes.
That's correct.
So, well,
So they would have to redo all of their electrical, plumbing, and the entire house in that case?
No,
If it was not code
only the
compliant.
areas of the alteration. So you may have to take a new home run wire back to the panel if it doesn't already meet code. But it would not require you to rewire the entire house.
If I'm getting ready to sell the house and I have you come in and do a home inspection, you'd be inspecting to the newest code.
No, sir, it would fall under the property maintenance code. That's different from.
Different than
building
this.
code. Yes,
So
sir.
I haven't hurt myself by going to a higher up code that will drastically change anything
No,
to work with. Now, the new homeowner buys it and comes into you and says, I'd like to remodel the interior and do X, Y, Z. Now we get into the new codes, and that's what he has to give you in his plans as to what he's changing and how it would comply,
That's correct.
the new homeowner.
The new, yeah, it's a different code. Now, I would like to add on there is a section on electrical in property maintenance that could bring some electrical items into play.
Not ground fault, GFIs and stuff that all of a sudden, by the way, gotta go replace all these. And no, just putting the circuit in the bathroom doesn't help. You gotta have the right wire to go to that circuit too,
Yeah.
type thing. Okay.
Can I just drop anchor a little bit on the, right, so under the new 2018 codes, if electrical are modified or extended, it appears they now be required to be brought up to standard similar new instead of being grandfathered in. This has the potential to increase construction costs significantly for level 2 alterations. So are we sure that, if I just pop a window into a wall and there's an outlet there, I wouldn't have to redo all of the electrical in the house to bring it up to compliance?
I don't believe so, because you're really not extending the electrical system. If you're removing a receptacle or something, there are issues that would have to be addressed with that, as far as you may have to, the easiest way to do it is probably to put a receptacle box there, so you can make the connection inside a compliant enclosure.
But in the case of a new bedroom or something, then you are extending the electrical system, so would that require,
That would require new circuitry back to the panel.
just for the new outlet, just for the extensions, not for the total?
Correct.
I just want to make sure we're not, you're putting another room on and you have to go in and,
Tear out the house.
The addition would have to be code compliant.
Is that different than under the existing code?
Not the way we're enforcing it. Because, any additions are required to meet the existing code that we inspect under now.
Okay. And on a different point, the ADA requirements, those are not part of a building code, is that right?
Well, ADA is not, ANSI is. The ANSI requirements and ADA requirements don't always completely mesh. ADA is enforced by a different authority.
My understanding is on ADA is usually enforced actually by courts.
Yes.
Somebody comes in and complains that a building's not ADA compliant, and then they can seek redress that way. But I had an architect friend of mine who told me, and I don't know if there's any truth to this, that the only state that has ADA part of the building codes is in California. And I'm just wondering, does it make any sense, or is that too cumbersome to make ADA part of the building code so that any new construction, specifically commercial, is ADA compliant? Or is that something we don't even want to?
Yeah, because of the enforcement issue, we don't get there.
Okay.
ANSI requirements and ADA requirements are very close.
They overlap in some areas, but they
In
don't.
some areas, they overlap. Probably the best example, or the easiest example would be typically, I don't know if you've ever seen like the vertical grab bar in an ADA. That is not required by the ADA.
Okay.
It is required by ANSI and ICC.
Okay.
Those are, I would think the major things are going to mesh.
Okay. Thank you.
Hey, Steve, under, I guess, under getting an occupancy, it talks about third-party verification of blower door test. What is a blower door test?
That is a test on, it comes from the Energy Efficiency Code. What they do is they mount a frame inside a door opening, and there's a fan in there that tries to create a vacuum in the house, inside the house. And it measures how many air changes would be in the house per hour. It's a requirement to verify the sealing of cracks and gaps and things like that. That would only be done on new home construction.
Okay, so this wouldn't be something we're doing, and once again, it would be a third party that the homeowner,
No, we would not do it. We don't have the
the
equipment
buyer
to
would
do
get
that
in
with.
to, okay.
typically that's handled through the insulation contractor.
And then it also mentions in here in the residential code, it talks about the air leakage rate and all that. Is that the same thing you're talking
Same
about
thing.
here? Okay. And then it also mentions something, a new section on modular units and tiny houses. If we don't permit tiny houses in our city, then this is just a moot point, or is this?
I think if the city does not desire to have any of those here, probably the best bet would be to delete the entire section. If you leave the section in there, you're kind of putting the direction
what I
out
was
there for them to do this.
Get into a conflict here with.
Yeah,
that.
I will add that that section in the code, in the 18 code, is for tiny houses on foundations. Not, there's a lot of these done on wheels or trailer frames and things like that, but it does the code changes in the tiny house section are mainly size issues. Obviously, there's stairway adjustments in there, but if Brentwood doesn't desire to have them, it probably would be best if we would delete the whole section.
Up everybody's time. I got one more quick question for you,
You're doing
Lisa.
good.
You're talking about meeting with builders and to go over these, or you've already done this, or?
We have not. Our contractors registration list for this year, the last time I looked at it, it's probably slightly under 200 contractors. So that would be our invitation list to start with. We could certainly publish this open meeting in other means, but again, we would start with our contractors registration. And then we were planning on having it the end of March, but it's here before you know it. But I'm comfortable still that if we would have it either the first part of April or somewhere where we can still get in if there is input received, that we could still have time to reflect on that, revise our ordinance accordingly if we would choose to. So again, we're looking at a timetable, bringing this back in April to you all, possibly getting everything adopted in May would be good. So having that meeting somewhere, probably end of March or first part of April, if that would, but we have to know for sure if we are gonna have any kind of exceptions that maybe would be good discussion points with that audience.
Mind letting us know when that meeting occurs with them?
Sure. Do you remember, I'm not sure if they did that the last time in 2014. I meant to look for that and I
I
forgot. I'm
don't
not sure if
recall
they-
that we got a heads up that that was headed.
Okay.
Do we need to make a motion to remove the tiny homes, both mobile and foundation-based, out of the code?
I think they're gonna go back and, you're gonna go back and kind of go over this and then come back to us with.
Sure, because remember when we had a couple of those requests come in? I
Yes,
think
we
that was
did.
last year too. And that was the first thing. We're like, well, okay, the zoning doesn't have provisions for it. But then secondly, you can't build a tiny home anywhere in an area that would have adopted the ICC codes, because you wouldn't have a house, a tiny home that was built to ICC standards. It just didn't work. So that's where these kind of, where this is now just found in the appendix where this section came from. But that's again, if you're in an area where you would desire to have tiny homes and would be allowing their construction. So in fact, we kind of figured that would come up, so we just talked about it really before this meeting. So I think we just need to leave obviously our zoning code the way it is, and then it would be wise, I think, just to go ahead and eliminate that section, so we're not even, there's not even inquiries
Thank you.
about it.
I'm very comfortable with
All
that.
right. Well,
Thank
thank
you,
you,
guys.
Lisa. Move on to citizen comment. Anybody from the audience? Don't see a stampede, so we'll move down. A motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Nice timing.
Well, it's nice having you on the committee, David.
No, actually, he will be in one more meeting.
No, oh, you think?
Well, the certification of the vote won't happen until after the
Oh,
11th
that's right, be
meeting.
the, what? Oh, that's right.
The vote's on the 2nd. The earliest they can get certified is 10 days after the election.